Welcome back to the Sage Sorority, guys. My name is Chantal, your founder and host. This is the Sage Sorority, your space for truth, wisdom, sisterhood, and self-concept for women in their 30s and 40s. Happy Thursday. When you guys listen to this, I will be on my way to Greece, and I'm very, very excited about it. I can't even say that I'm looking forward to a few days in the sun because the weather in London has been absolutely delightful, and we have been so spoiled lately. So I'm literally just going from sun to more sun. But at least in Greece, I'll have the benefit of the sea, fantastic wine, incredible food, and I'm really looking forward to it. So today's a quickie, and it's all about long live the solo trip and why I believe solo trips are literally a spiritual rite of passage for women. And it's something I hope and wish and pray that all women do before they get partnered and or have children. So let's discuss. So part of the reason that I'm so passionate about the solo trip is because I feel like women often delay things in hopes of doing when they get a partner. And sure, I'm not dictating your life and I'm not saying you should do everything before you get partnered up and or have children. But what I am saying is that I don't necessarily believe in postponing joy and a joyous moment until you quote unquote like get a man. I really don't agree with that. I know that some people will argue solo travel is not for everyone. I mean, duh, nothing is for everyone. But I do think that it's something way more women should do and take advantage of. We need to be encouraging our friends and our daughters and ourselves to do more with the time that we have. So often we put off seeing the world until someone can come with us. It's my same methodology when it comes to jewelry. When I turned 30, I was like, I want to buy real jewelry for myself. And I just want to basically accrue this massive collection. And I remember telling a friend of a friend that, when I turned 30, I started buying jewelry for myself or started buying rings specifically. And she was like, oh, I don't want to buy any rings for myself. I want my husband to buy rings for me. Okay, fine. If you genuinely don't want to do that, that's fine. But the idea that you're not going to buy jewelry that you like or that you love just because you're going to wait for a man to give it to you, like your husband. And I'm not taking away the importance or value necessarily of a woman who wants to get married and wants those kind of experiences with her husband. But I just need girls to kind of tap in sometimes that for the most part, like large and wide, men do not think like this. Like that kind of fairy tale-ism, like I only want to do this with my wife, or I only want to have these experiences with my wife. Like you just don't often hear men saying, unless it's like on a very large and serious level. But like a ring, like I'm not saying you should go out and buy your own engagement ring, but like we're not going to buy jewelry for ourselves because like men have to buy us jewelry. Like I just thought it was a bit narrow-minded, I think. And that's fine. Everyone's entitled to do what they want when they want. But I am offering a different train of thought and I'm offering a different perspective and one that I think is wildly and incredibly expansive. Nothing about what I'm saying is meant to shrink you or peg you down. I actually think it does the opposite. We can often wait for a partner, a friend, a group chat, all of these things, right? But why wait for someone else to see the world when you can just take yourself on a trip? Like, really, especially if you have the means. You don't need a breakup or some massive crisis to justify it either. You don't even need a passport stamp sometimes. A solo day trip somewhere local ish or an overnight train to a nearby town, whatever, is all it takes to remind you of your own power, your own possibility, your own joy, your own sexiness, all of the things. Trust me on this. Okay, so I'll share like a little quick story. So a couple of years ago, actually, this is many years ago at this point, I went to Portugal alone. I did 10 days in Portugal. This was my entire trip itinerary. I flew into the Azores, then immediately left and connected to Porto. I did a few days in Porto, then I went down to Lisbon, and then after Lisbon, I went back to Porto to end my trip, which was where my flight home was. And plot twist, I got wild food poisoning in Lisbon. I got it from grocery store spaghetti. So, you can just really get it anywhere. And I remember thinking that it tasted a bit weird, but I was like, oh, maybe that's just how they make spaghetti here. Like, not even thinking, oh my God. I was so scared. Like, I had like bad food before, but this was really bad. Like, I'd never been so sick. Other than COVID, I'd never been that sick. I'm running around Lisbon trying to find an English speaking doctor. So much harder than you would think. But I had travel insurance, thank God. And I had a belief in myself that I would be okay. Like, although I was like a bit scared and I was quite unwell, obviously, I was okay. Like, I had my wits about me. I honestly thought about going home, and the cost was wild. But then deep down, I knew that the worst had passed. So I was like, let me just keep on with my trip. So I stayed and I ended up having a truly beautiful time and peaceful time in the Azores. And although that's not like the best trip I've ever been on, it was such an impactful one for obviously many of the reasons that I mentioned. And honestly, if I had gone and done that trip with someone else, it probably would have ruined their trip. It partially ruined mine, but it would have absolutely ruined that person's trip. I would have had to be super aware of their feelings. I would have felt insanely guilty that I was so sick and this person was happy and healthy, and now their trip is ruined because they don't want to do these things maybe by themselves, or they're worried about me. Me being on my own, this was definitely like the bright spot, was that I could heal on my own schedule without any guilt or pressure. And then I could take my time and still enjoy the rest of my trip again without any guilt or pressure. Since then, I've done a few trips by myself. I did 3 days in Athens in early January 2023. And I did 3 days in Berlin in early January 2023. So basically, my BA points were going to expire or something like that. So I had to use it. And then BA is so strict. They were like, you can't just like book the trip before it expires. Like, you actually have to take off before it expires. So I literally went to Athens for 3 days in the beginning of the week, came back, flipped my suitcase, and then went to Berlin for 3 days. So Athens in January was obviously chilly. They were definitely going through like a cold snap, but it was still gorgeous. It was still sunny. Obviously, Berlin was freezing. But I remember telling so many people that I was going to Athens, and no one had anything positive to say. They're like, it's gritty, it's grimy. Oh, you don't need anything more than a day there. Oh, that's my least favorite part about Greece. All of this. And I just, one, like, I wasn't convinced because I was like, I know myself. I'm a city girl through and through. Like, put me in a city and we are going to get on. And I was like, I just don't believe it. And then you hear these people, they're going in July, they're going in August while they're going to the islands. And it's just like, of course, you're not going to enjoy yourself because you want to be by the sea. Like, you're on your way to Santorini. I just like, wasn't convinced. I was like, you know what? I don't care because I want to check it off the box. I love Greek food. I love Greek men. Like, I was fine. I went. Guys, I fucking loved it. And I was like, I will never take advice from people ever again. I mean, I know that's very dramatic, but that's how I felt at the moment. I was like, I loved it. Like, you see all these cats running around, which obviously I'm like not a big fan of like stray animals, but you see all these cats running around. Food was amazing. Uber. Things are so inexpensive. I went to the spa. There's an Hermes there. I mean, I didn't buy anything, but like if an Hermes is there, it's got to be a good place, which was also my rationale too. I was like, how bad could it be? There's an Hermes store there. Like, that doesn't make sense. Guys, I really believe that when you're taking advice, this is why I always say consider the source, because it's like, these are also people that see graffiti and think that like the city's grummy. And it's just like, yeah, it's just a fucking city. Like, that's how cities are. And one thing I love to do when I'm solo tripping is take some sort of a tour. I'm not the biggest like culture person in that respect. Like, museums are okay, but I prefer like live culture. So I would rather go to the opera and the theater any day of the week. But I don't really do that when it's such a short trip. But what I like to do is take some sort of a tour. So I usually like a bike tour because I just love being on a bike. It literally like heals my inner child. And because it was fucking January, I was the only one on the tour, which works for me. The guy was so cool. He lived in the US for a little bit and then came back to Athens. He showed me like these secret spots. He took some of my pictures and he was like, yeah, people have like a weird perspective on Athens, but it's such an amazing city. And I was like, you know what? You're right. Like, I just really enjoyed it. And I was like, wow, I'm never going to let people like tell me anything ever again. It was the same thing with going to Berlin. Like, everyone's like, oh, I love Berlin, but you have to go in the summer, like the winter. And Berlin was lovely. And yes, I would want to go back in the summer, but now at least I know it's worth going back. Sometimes you go to places, guys, and it's really just a one and done. And that's also okay. The more you travel, the more likely it is that you're going to encounter places that are just okay. Like, maybe you don't feel the need to rush back, or you would only go back if you had a reason. That is okay. A place like that for me for a very long time was Istanbul. I didn't have the greatest experience in Istanbul just because I felt like taxi drivers were quite rude. But this is before Uber was really taking off abroad. And I just felt like they weren't that nice. It was a bunch of us who were all Black, and I just never really got hospitality. And I will say that. I do think that things have changed and the way people are with tourists and all that kind of stuff. This was several years ago. So I would go back to Istanbul, but only if I had a reason. Like if I had a friend that was like, let's go, and they had been there before, then maybe there's a Soho House in Istanbul. So I feel like I would go spend a lot of time there, but it's not somewhere that I would just pick up and go like by myself on a whim, just because it was just a bit meh the last time. So obviously solo travel isn't always Instagram perfect. I told you guys about my violent food poisoning. But there's some other things that I do want to shed light on because I feel like it's honest and it's real. And that is, you may feel lonely, you may feel awkward, you might even feel a little anxious. You might have these moments of pure joy and pride and ultimate freedom. And all of those things are super normal. Like, and what I'm trying to say with the solo trip is like, don't resist that. Like, also don't avoid going places just because of that. Let them wash over you. Like I always say, emotions are like waves. They will come in, and if you give them time, they will come out. Every emotion and the feelings that you're having is part of the experience, and you will come out on the other side stronger, more self aware, more in tune with yourself, and dare I say, like a little sexy. I think solo travel, especially if you're single, oh my God, but also if you're partnered, because I feel like when you're partnered, you just kind of get used to not dealing with the opposite sex, or you get used to not dealing with anyone like outside of your bubble. And it just forces you to like be friendly, chat people up, and feel like a little sexy, a little sensual. And this is not about like validation from men. This is more about just being in tune with yourself and like getting into your groove, if that makes sense. You can be a little flirty, you can be a little bit more friendly, you can do things that maybe you wouldn't do at home in obviously a safe and responsible way, but just in a way that gets you back in tune with yourself. Like, who are you on vacation without the labels, without the responsibility, without the social ties, without the burden of your city, your town, your province, your state, your country? You know what I mean? Like, what does the world look like as you explore it on your own schedule, your own vibe, your own point of view? Like, I remember being like brokenhearted and spending a few days in Rome and then like going on a date with this lawyer and him putting me on the back of his Vespa and like bringing me to this random like point in Rome to like watch the stars. Like, come on, I would have never done that in London, ever. I was like living out my Lizzie McGuire like fantasies, like legit. And then still sad because obviously my feelings didn't disappear in like a few days. And I'm like on a train to Florence to continue on my trip. And then spent a few days in Tuscany with this amazing man. Like, you can write your own story and have your own little escapes and have a really, really, really good time, you know? And I'm so glad I had those memories. Like, I don't think I'll ever relive something like that ever again. I mean, who knows? Knock on wood. But the point is like, I look back on those memories with such fondness and a big fucking smile on my face because I just know that if I can look back on those memories, and those were several years ago, 20, 30 years from now, I'm going to be like, fuck, thank God I lived my life. Okay, so let's talk about safety. It is very important. And this really is not to fearmonger, obviously. Um, but safety is not about living in fear. It's really just about living freely and confidently and doing the right things because we know the world that we live in. So here are some of my top tips. Obviously, this is like solo travel, but you should really just use it for any type of travel, I think. So you want to trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. Your safety matters more than politeness. Don't get me started on the word nice. We need to throw it in the bin forever. I just did a TikTok about it. I'll link it down below. You guys, your safety and you getting back home to your friends, family, coworkers, enemies, whatever, is of the utmost importance. You do not owe anyone, man or woman, an explanation or to go against your gut. So don't do it. Be prepared and not paranoid. So share your itinerary with someone that you trust. Save emergency contacts on actual paper. Just in case you lose your phone or your phone dies, you'd be surprised, especially if you're traveling in Europe and some places in South America. Like phone theft is a very, very big thing. My North Americans, I know you're not as common with that, but it is very big. So if you lose your phone and you don't have maybe $1,000 to instantly buy a new one and you don't have your phone backed up, all of these things. So be very mindful of that. Go online and get those kind of like phones dropped. I know people really like that, but you just want to be careful and you want to have numbers at the ready. Barely anyone remembers numbers anymore because we're so used to our phone. So you want to have that. I highly recommend sharing your location with a few people. So obviously I live in London, I'm from Toronto, and if I'm going to Greece or wherever, I would share my location. My mom and one of my sisters have my location always, but obviously they're abroad. So I highly recommend sharing it with maybe a friend or a partner, obviously, but then maybe a friend who lives close to you, maybe not your bestest friend, but just one that lives close to your house. And then maybe your most responsible and or responsive friend. So whatever friend you have that you know if you send a text, they're going to answer in like 10 minutes or less. And they just always have their phone and they're just a very responsible person. I would send your location and your itinerary to them as well. Also, you want to download offline maps before you go and get directions from maybe like your hotel to your excursion, stuff like that. So you have it ready to go. And obviously, translation apps if you will be doing that. If you're going somewhere and you don't speak the local language, translation apps are incredibly helpful. My preferred translation app is actually just called Translate in the App Store. Also, you want to choose accommodations wisely. When we see things in the news, unfortunately, about especially solo female travelers being harmed or unalived, I'm not trying to be like elitist, but oftentimes these are guest homes, Airbnbs that are shared and or hostels. You guys have to be careful with where you're staying and who you're staying with. And things are different in different regions. Maybe you're like, I always use Airbnbs when I'm in the US, so I'm going to Costa Rica, I'm going to use an Airbnb too. It's like different places have different laws and different customs, and everyone's idea of safety is very different. And you don't want to put your safety in someone else's hands that you don't really know. Read reviews from other solo female travelers. This is very important. The times that I do stay in Airbnb, I don't do it often anymore, but I always look to see if women have stayed. And personally, this is my personal opinion, I never stay in Airbnbs that are shared. It's just not my thing. I need to have my own place. Absolutely. And to be honest, the only place I've stayed in Airbnb like in the last few years has been Dubai because there's just always a million apartments in Dubai that are like vacant. And those are usually ran by property management companies. I know people do shared room Airbnbs. I implore you to only stay with women. Make sure that your room has an actual lock on it. You need to ensure that you are safe. This is not about the homeowner's privacy or it's their house. You are a paying guest. Don't stay anywhere that you don't feel is safe and make sure that your safety is respected the entire time. For those of us that prefer to stay in hotels, you can ask for a room near the elevator. Just be mindful that it might be a little noisy. Not everyone likes that. Some people say that solo female travelers should also stay at a room closest to the stairwell. I'm like 50-50 on that because if the stairwell isn't locked, some hotels have like passkey for the stairwell, some are not, which means that it's very easy for anyone to just be in the stairs. So for me, I prefer not to. I would rather stay like either closest to the elevator or slightly out of the elevator's view, because if I'm on an elevator with a man and I get off first, I don't want him to be able to see my room while I'm standing there, if that makes sense. So this is just kind of how the little things that I do to make sure that I'm safe. When you are at a hotel and you are checking in, make sure that the person at the front desk doesn't read your number out loud. That's a very big thing. I think most hotels know that now. They should just be writing it on the little envelope and handing it to you. They shouldn't be saying it out loud, obviously for safety. If they do say it out loud and maybe there's a lot of people around you or there's like men around you and you just don't feel very comfortable, ask for another room. Always check for secure locks and bring your own carbon monoxide detector, especially those of you that stay at resorts in the Caribbean and so on and so forth. You guys need to be bringing your own carbon monoxide detector. You can get them on Amazon. They're not expensive. Usually they even come with batteries. Take it out, put the box in your luggage and just keep it there. Always good to go. Highly, highly recommend that. And wherever you're staying, you should have double locks. So the regular lock, like a secure lock from just shutting the door, and then you should have some sort of a deadbolt. If you don't, that is an issue. I'm not gonna lie. You should have two locks wherever you're staying. I always double lock my door, and oftentimes if I'm in a hotel, I will barricade my suitcase and my chair in front of the door. This is no shame. I literally don't care if someone thinks I'm crazy, insane, whatever. That is not my problem. My issue and my concern is being able to sleep comfortably, peacefully, and safely. So I will put my suitcase there. If depending on the door handle, I will loop my suitcase around it, like my handle. I will put the desk chair in front of it. If the desk is light and or close to the door, I'll even slide the desk over slightly. Whatever it I need to do to ensure that it's a safe experience for me, I'm going to do, and I highly recommend you do as well. You also want to be a responsible and respectful traveler by dressing for the local culture. You don't want to stand out in a negative way and anything that just screams, I'm a tourist. I will say in Europe, especially like in London, if I'm like in Mayfair or anything like that, I can spot a North American, right? They might as well be wearing a sign because there's always some sort of sports gear. Like one thing Americans love is like sports. So they love to wear like NFL jerseys, MLB memorabilia, like anything. They need to be wearing like their sports team abroad, which is very strange because those professional teams like don't exist over here. So people don't really care, but maybe it's like virtue signaling, like one American to another, but it's an easy way to spot them. So yeah, I mean, obviously in London, it doesn't matter. Like, I don't think you're sticking out in a negative way, but you'd be surprised how you might think you're dressing regularly, but to a local's eye, you definitely stand out as a tourist. You want to avoid flashy jewelry. This is not the time for you to be like so excited for your Van Cleef, your Cartier, your Patek. Like, it's just really not the time for all that, especially depending on where you're going. Now, every location is different and you have to be aware, but that is something to be mindful of. And you want to walk with a purpose. So when you're checking your phone for directions, I always step aside and put my back to the wall. So I do that for a couple of reasons. One, I hate when people just stop in the middle of wherever they are because they're lost. It's like, first of all, now you're just blocking the sidewalk. And also, like, you put yourself as a target to like get your phone stolen or get pickpocketed or whatever. And obviously, I'm in London where these things are very rampant, even for locals. So I always like go to the side of an alley or just put my back towards the wall, look at where I need to go, my next few steps, and then I put my phone in my bag and then I go. I highly recommend this. I did this when I was in Marrakesh, but ultimately, don't be scared, guys. Every trip is a chance to trust yourself a little bit more. And like anything, the more you do it, the better at it you get. Okay, so I will quickly go through some of my favorite apps for when you're traveling. This is honestly solo travel or whatever you're traveling with kids, whatever. It doesn't really matter. I will list them in the show notes, and if I think of any more, I will list them for you as well. So I like ViaTour for tours and experiences. You always want to go for tours and experiences that have 5 reviews because you want to make sure that one, people are not getting scammed. Two, they're actually getting the tour that they believe and that the tour is running. Sometimes tours are not running, even though it's on ViaTour. And you also want to make sure that there are recent reviews. If you're looking at reviews in June of 2025 and the last person to leave a review was like April or January, I wouldn't book it because you just don't know what's going on with that tour. The only caveat to that is that if it's significantly more expensive, if it's like a very private, niche, expensive tour, then people might not book it as often. So just try and find out if it's still a go. CityMapper is absolutely incredible in London for transit. I know it exists in a few European cities, but I don't know which one specifically. But CityMapper is amazing for specifically for transit directions. I like Google Maps for walking and driving. I don't drive in London, but when I do drive abroad, I like Google Maps for walking and driving. CityMapper also has walking, but it's not as good as Google Maps. Waze, obviously, for real-time traffic. Waze is very subjective, but I know I've used it in Toronto and I have used it in London, and I do find it to be quite accurate. Maps.me is really good if you want offline maps. I think Google Maps works offline as well, but this is just something to think about. If you're someone who doesn't really buy a lot of data when you're abroad, you're happy to just kind of like raw dog it and use free Wi-Fi whenever you go, then these things will be very important to you. XE, literally those 2 letters for currency conversion. Sometimes mental math is very difficult and you always want to know if you're getting scammed. So I like to have that just as a quickaroo, your home currency with the local currency and just find out, how much you're spending on things to make sure you're getting good value. Rome to Rio, like Rome, the city, to Rio, the city, is a really good app if you're someone who will be traveling and using multiple travel methods. Like if you're like, okay, to get from point A to point B, we have to walk, take an Uber, take a train, and take a ferry. Rome to Rio is good because it can collate all of those things and give you actual and accurate travel directions. Bumble BFF, I swear by for meeting new friends. When I was in Rome, I think the first time I met two girls for drinks. One of them I'm still friends with because she moved back to London. And whenever I find myself in a new city, I like to get on Bumble BFF and meet a local gal pal. It's truly my A1 day one way for meeting women abroad. I use it heavily when I moved to London. I still use it. Um, if you are going somewhere and you need VPN, I like Express VPN for secure browsing. For example, when I go to Dubai or anywhere in the UAE, you're not allowed to use WhatsApp calls and FaceTime. You need a VPN for that. If you're going to China, you absolutely need a VPN. So it just depends on where you're going. That's a very niche travel experience. In most countries, you're probably not going to run into that, but it is something to know. And then finally, there's an app called Flush. I think it's only US. I could be wrong, but it helps to find the nearest bathroom. So to wrap this up, ultimately why I wanted to make this episode was one, encourage all you guys to do it because I think it's amazing and I'd highly recommend 10 out of 10, no notes. But on a deeper level and a spiritual level, it's more about not taking time for granted because here's the truth that we just don't talk about enough. And it's that you might not have the same amount of money, freedom, or even like good knees, if we're being real, in 5, 10, or 25 years. Life can truly change in an instant. And that doesn't mean you need to be impulsive, but it does mean you shouldn't wait and rack up regrets. And I just don't want you guys to waste your own time, especially if there's a seed blooming in you for new and different experiences. Like I said earlier, solo travel doesn't have to mean going overseas. Start small, honestly, a day trip to a new town. It could be an overnight somewhere local. I just want you guys to expand your idea of what's possible, expand your idea of what you can accomplish and what you can experience on your own, because you truly just might surprise yourself. Don't wait for someone else to give you permission to live your life. The world is yours and yours alone to explore on your terms, in your time, and with your own beautiful perspective. Your future self will thank you for every step that you take today. We know this, right? Anyways, that's it for today's episode, guys. I'm in Greece, sending you lots of love. If you have a solo travel story or a lesson learned, maybe a good lesson learned or a hard lesson learned, LOL, please send me a message. I would love to hear from you. You know where to find me on Instagram and on TikTok. Don't wait for the group chat. Don't wait for the man. Don't wait for the friend. What you can do today, don't procrastinate. Until next time, guys, I love you so much. You are the author of your own adventure and don't let anyone else hold the pen. Have a beautiful week. I will talk to you next week. Also, can we do a little hip hip hooray for episode 20? I'm so proud of myself for this consistency of 20 weeks, rain or shine, Uber or plane, hungover or sober, that I have delivered a podcast to you all. And that makes me so happy. And wherever you are today, have a drink for me. Cheers to me, because I will be cheersing for myself all weekend long. Love you. Bye.